The words drifted from the kitchen, threading through the murmur of family conversation and the clinking of glasses. "Don't worry," James said, his voice a low, conspiratorial hum. "She signed without reading." A soft chuckle followed, the sound utterly devoid of warmth. It was the kind of sound that snagged on the air, heavy and sharp. I was in the hallway about to join them for a celebratory toast, but my feet froze to the floor. My hand, holding a small, gift-wrapped box for their anniversary, tightened until my knuckles were white. He meant Lucy, my sister. The woman who floated through life on a cloud of gentle trust, believing in the inherent goodness of people, most of all her husband. For 10 years, James had been a fixture in our family, a man of easy smiles and firm handshakes. He ran a moderately successful construction business, always seemed to have a new project on the horizon, and doted on Lucy in a way that, from the outside, looked like perfect devotion. He called her his sweet, innocent Lucy, and everyone would smile, thinking it was a term of endearment. But hearing him now, that phrase echoed in my mind not with affection, but with a chilling condescension. My heart began to beat a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. What had she signed? Just an hour earlier, James had produced a sheaf of papers from his briefcase, his expression a mask of casual importance. "Just some routine stuff for the new development, darling," he'd said, uncapping a pen and sliding it across the polished dining table to Lucy. "A formality for the bank. You know how they are." Lucy, in the middle of telling our mother about her volunteer work at the local animal shelter, had barely glanced at the pages. She'd picked up the pen, her brow furrowed for a second, not at the text, but at a smudge of ink on her finger. She'd signed her name with a loopy, carefree flourish on the 3 pages James had indicated with a neat X. Then she'd pushed them back toward him and immediately returned to her story, the entire transaction lasting no more than 30 seconds. At the time, I'd felt a familiar pang of sisterly exasperation. Lucy's trusting nature often felt like a liability in a world that wasn't always kind. I'd made a mental note to gently scold her later, to remind her to be more careful. But this was different. This wasn't about being careless with a credit card application or a petition for the city park. James's hushed, triumphant tone suggested a different level of deception. It wasn't the voice of a husband handling a minor chore with his wife. It was the voice of a predator closing a trap. I backed away from the hallway entrance, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't face them. Not now. The celebratory champagne waiting on the counter suddenly seemed obscene. Peeking around the corner, I saw my mother and father laughing at something my father had said. Lucy was smiling, her eyes fixed on James with pure, unadulterated love as he rejoined them, a smug little twist to his lips that only I seemed to notice. He placed a possessive hand on the small of her back. The sight sent a tremor of rage and fear through me. I had to know what was in those papers. My mind raced. The originals were probably already tucked safely back in his briefcase, but he had made copies. I'd seen him do it, using the all-in-one printer in their home office just before the guests arrived. He'd been collating pages when I walked past, and I'd teased him about never stopping working. "You know me, Sophie," he'd grinned, always closing a deal. The copy. The copy was my only chance. While the family moved toward the living room, their laughter echoing behind me, I slipped in the opposite direction, toward the office. The door was slightly ajar. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a drum of warning. This was my sister's home, my brother-in-law's private space, but the image of Lucy's trusting smile and the sound of James's cruel whisper pushed me forward. I wasn't just crossing a line of familial etiquette. I was stepping into a shadow I never knew existed, and I had a dreadful feeling that what I found there would change everything. The copy was on the printer tray, exactly where he'd left it. With trembling hands, I picked it up. I didn't dare read the documents in the house. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant peal of laughter from the living room, felt like an impending discovery. My guilt and my fury were a toxic cocktail, and I felt sure they were written all over my face. Stuffing the thin stack of papers under the waistband of my jeans, the crisp edges digging into my skin, I pulled my sweater down and walked back toward the edge of the living room. Lucy saw me first. "Sophie, there you are, we're about to cut the cake." Her smile was radiant, a beacon of pure happiness in a room that now felt suffocatingly false. I have a sudden migraine," I stammered, pressing my fingertips to my temple for effect. It wasn't entirely a lie. A headache was indeed beginning to hammer behind my eyes, born of stress and disbelief. "It's come on so fast. I think I need to get some air. I'm so sorry, Luce." Her face fell, concern immediately replacing her joy. "Oh no! Do you need anything? Some water?" Painkillers? No, no. Fresh air is the best thing, I said, already backing toward the front door. Please don't let me ruin the moment. Cut the cake. I'll be back in a little bit, or I'll call you. Are you sure? James added, his arms still draped around Lucy's shoulders. He had an expression of mild, detached concern, the kind one might offer a stranger. His eyes, however, were sharp. They scanned my face, and for a terrifying second, I thought he could see the stolen papers, could sense the knowledge I now possessed. Did my hands tremble? Was I pale? I forced a weak smile. Positive. You two enjoy your night. Happy anniversary, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I slipped out the door before they could protest further, the sound of the latch clicking shut behind me feeling like a seal on a tomb. The cool night air was a shock, but a welcome one. I practically ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. Once inside, I locked the doors, my chest heaving as if I'd just escaped a burning building. In a way, I had. The dome light flickered on as I pulled the papers from my waistband. My hands shook so badly it was hard to focus on the dense black text. The title at the top of the first page was Unlimited Personal Guarantee. I was no lawyer, but I knew what a guarantee was. And the word unlimited sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. I started reading, my eyes scanning the jargon-filled paragraphs, searching for anything I could understand. The legalese was thick, designed to be impenetrable, but certain phrases leaped out, stark and brutal. Hereinafter referred to as the guarantor, Lucy Marie Albright. In consideration of the lender providing credit facilities to JC Construction, LLC, the guarantor hereby irrevocably and unconditionally guarantees the full and punctual payment of any and all indebtedness. The numbers were staggering. The loan James's company was taking on was for a sum with so many zeros I had to count them twice. It was millions. And Lucy, my sweet, unsuspecting sister, had just personally guaranteed all of it. If James's business defaulted, the lenders wouldn't just go after the company's assets. They would come for her. Then I saw the second section, Collateral Assignment of Property. My blood ran cold. It listed their primary residence, which I knew James had put a significant down payment on. But then below it was another address. An address I knew as well as my own. 212 Oak Lane. The small, charming house our grandmother had left solely to Lucy. It was her nest egg, her safety net, her one piece of the world that was entirely her own. James had never had any claim to it. Until now. She had just signed it over as collateral for his massive, high-risk business loan. He hadn't just put her at risk. He had taken her safety net and bet it on his own ambition. The casualness with which he had done it, the smug chuckle I'd overheard, it was a portrait of breathtaking cruelty. He hadn't seen her as a partner, but as a resource, an untapped asset to be liquidated. The whole performance, the formality for the bank, the quick dismissive slide of paper, it was all a calculated act of theater, designed to exploit her defining characteristic, her trust. I leaned my head back against the seat, the car's interior feeling small and airless. The image of Lucy's smiling face, the love in her eyes as she looked at James, was burned into my mind. Telling her would be like taking a sledgehammer to the beautiful, fragile world she had built. It would destroy her. But not telling her, letting this stand, that would lead to a different kind of destruction, a financial ruin she would never see coming, orchestrated by the man she loved most. My trembling stopped, replaced by a sudden, glacial calm. This was beyond a family argument. This was not something I could fix by yelling at James or trying to explain the complexities to Lucy in a panic. He would deny, he would deflect, he would gaslight both of us until we felt like we were the crazy ones. I had the proof in my hands, but I didn't have the power to wield it. Not alone. I needed someone who understood the language of this betrayal. Someone who could turn this flimsy copy into a weapon. My fingers found my phone, the screen lighting up my determined face. I didn't search for a family friend or a number in my contacts. I opened a web browser and typed in 3 words: contract litigation lawyer. The party inside, the cake, the celebration, it all ceased to exist. There was only the quiet hum of the engine and the cold, hard resolve to burn James's world to the ground. The next morning, the world seemed unnervingly normal. The sun cast long shadows across the street, birds chirped, and people walked their dogs. It was a stark, jarring contrast to the tempest raging inside me. I hadn't slept. I had spent the night on my sofa, the copied documents spread on the coffee table like a tarot reading of doom, going over them again and again until the words blurred into meaningless symbols. But their meaning was all too clear. I had made an appointment first thing in the morning. The lawyer I'd chosen was from a mid-sized firm, one whose website didn't feature flashy slogans, but rather a long list of credentials in commercial and contract law. His name was Arthur Evans. His office was on the 7th floor of a nondescript glass building downtown, a world away from the manicured lawns and deceptive tranquility of my sister's neighborhood. Walking into the quiet, tastefully decorated reception area, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This was a place of facts and consequences, a place where the kind of soft, emotional manipulation James specialized in had no currency. Here, only the black and white of the printed page mattered. Arthur Evans was an older man, probably in his late 60s, with thinning gray hair and eyes that seemed to see more than you were showing. He didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances when I was shown into his office. He simply gestured to the chair opposite his large, uncluttered desk and said, "Ms. Clark, please, have a seat. My assistant said it was a matter of some urgency." "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Mr. Evans," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "My name is Sophie Clark. My sister is Lucy Albright. Yesterday, her husband James had her sign some documents. I have reason to believe she didn't know what she was signing." I slid the stack of papers across the desk. He picked them up without a word, put on a pair of reading glasses that had been hanging around his neck, and began to read. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the soft rustle of paper as he turned from one page to the next. I watched his face, searching for a reaction, but it was a practiced, neutral mask. Yet I saw a subtle tightening around his jaw. A brief, almost imperceptible pause as he read the collateral section. After what felt like an eternity, he laid the papers down, aligning them perfectly. He took off his glasses and looked at me, his gaze direct and heavy. "Well, Ms. Clark," he said, his voice even, "your instincts are correct. These are predatory documents." The validation, so clinically delivered, almost made me weep with a strange mix of relief and terror. "This is a standard, albeit aggressively written, unlimited personal guarantee," he continued, tapping the first page. "It means your sister, Lucy Albright, has personally secured a business loan for JC Construction, LLC. The unlimited part means her liability is not capped at a certain amount. If the business defaults, the lender can pursue her for the entire outstanding debt, plus interest and fees, whatever that amount may be." He let that sink in. "They can, and they will, go after her personal assets. Bank accounts, investments, wages. Her house," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. He nodded slowly. "And her house. That's the second part. The collateral assignment of property is unambiguous. She has pledged her solely owned property at 212 Oak Lane as security for the loan. If the LLC defaults, the lender has the right to seize and sell that house to recoup their losses." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Ms. Clark, did her husband explain any of this to her?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "He told her it was a formality for the bank. She was distracted. She signed it in less than a minute. I overheard him later, bragging that she signed without reading." Mr. Evans let out a long, slow sigh. It was a sound of professional weariness, of a man who had seen this same sad story play out many times before. Fraudulent inducement is exceptionally difficult to prove, especially between spouses. It becomes a he said, she said situation. He will claim he explained it. She will say he didn't. But her signature, unfortunately, is legally binding. A court's view is often that an adult has a responsibility to read what they sign. My last flicker of hope that this could be easily undone died. "So, what can we do?" "The first step is knowledge," he said, his tone shifting from diagnostic to strategic. "Your sister needs to know what she has done. She needs to understand the precise nature of the risk she has been placed under, and she needs to be the one to act. You cannot act on her behalf." "But it will crush her," I pleaded, telling her this when it's not just about money. It's about her marriage, her husband. It will destroy her faith in him. "And what do you think will happen when the first default notice arrives in the mail?" he countered, his voice firm but not unkind. "What happens when a foreclosure sign is hammered into the lawn of your grandmother's house? Which scenario is more crushing? The truth from you now, or the ruin from a stranger later? Right now, you have the advantage of surprise. He doesn't know that you know. That is the only leverage we have." He was right. I knew he was right. My duty was not to protect Lucy's feelings, but to protect her future. "So I tell her," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And then what?" "Then," Mr. Evans said, "she has a choice to make. We can approach the lender. We can confront the husband. We can explore options to try and rescind the guarantee, though that will be an uphill battle. But nothing can happen until she is aware of the sword hanging over her head. My advice is that you tell her, and you do it soon. And if you wish, I can be present when you do, to explain the legal realities and prevent her husband from trying to manipulate his way out of it. I left his office an hour later, the documents now in my briefcase. A copy of Mr. Evans's business card tucked inside. The city seemed louder now, the normal bustle of life more chaotic. I had a clear, terrifying mission: to detonate a bomb in the middle of my sister's life in the desperate hope that the blast would be small enough for her to survive it. Telling her was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. There was no good way to do it. No gentle combination of words that could soften the blow. I called her the next afternoon, my excuse being a simple desire to see her. I feigned nonchalance, asking if James was home. When she said he was at a site meeting an hour away, I told her I'd be over in 20 minutes. I found her in the garden, humming to herself as she pruned her rose bushes. She was wearing yellow gardening gloves and a sun hat, a picture of peaceful domesticity. Seeing her like that, so untroubled, so immersed in her simple, happy life, made my task feel monstrous. My throat closed up. "Sophie, I'm so glad you came over. My headache is gone, by the way." "I was just feeling a bit overwhelmed the other night," she said, pulling off her gloves and giving me a warm hug. "Come on, I'll make us some iced tea." "Actually, Luce," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "can we talk inside? It's important." The shift in my tone was enough to erase her smile. A flicker of concern crossed her face, the same look she'd given me at the party. "Of course. Is everything okay? You look so pale." We sat at the same dining table where she had signed away her future. The afternoon sun streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a silent, indifferent audience to the impending wreckage. I didn't know how to start, so I just laid the papers on the table between us. Not my copy, but a fresh one I'd had Mr. Evans make. It looked official, sterile. Lucy stared at them. "What's this?" "These are copies of the documents you signed the other night," I said, my voice flat. She glanced at them, then back at me, a hint of confusion in her eyes. "Okay, James's business papers. What about them?" "Lucy, did you read them?" She let out a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "No, not really. You know how it is, it was all legal stuff. James said it was just a formality." "What's the matter?" I took a deep breath. "He lied to you, Lucy." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Lucy recoiled as if I'd slapped her. Her face hardened. "Sophie, don't be so dramatic. What are you talking about? Don't say that about my husband." "I wish I didn't have to," I said, my own voice trembling now. "But I can't let him do this to you. This isn't a formality. It's a personal guarantee. You didn't just sign as a witness, Lucy. You signed as the guarantor for a multi-million-dollar loan for his company." She stared at me, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. "That's not true. James would have told me if it was something that serious. You've misunderstood it." "I haven't misunderstood," I pushed, sliding the paper closer to her. "Look, the guarantor hereby irrevocably and unconditionally guarantees the full and punctual payment of any and all indebtedness. You are the guarantor, Lucy, not the company. You." She wouldn't look at the paper. Her eyes were fixed on me, blazing with a protective loyalty that broke my heart. "James loves me. He would never put me at risk like that." "Why are you doing this, Sophie? Are you still angry that I married him?" The accusation, a ghost from an old, long-settled argument a decade ago, stung. "This has nothing to do with that, and everything to do with protecting you. I heard him, Lucy. After you signed, I heard him in the kitchen. He was talking to someone, and he said, 'Don't worry, she signed without reading.'" Her face went slack, the anger momentarily draining away, replaced by a flicker of doubt. She remembered his tone, I could tell. She had heard that same condescending note in his voice before, but had always explained it away. "That's not all," I said, my voice softening. "He didn't just put your finances at risk. He put Grandma's house up as collateral." This finally broke through her denial. Her eyes widened and her gaze dropped to the documents. Her hands, which had been clenched into fists on her lap, rose and shakily traced the lines of text as if she could absorb the truth through her fingertips. I pointed to the collateral assignment section, to the address of the house she cherished, the one place on earth that was hers and hers alone. She read it. Then she read it again. The color drained from her face, leaving her a ghastly translucent white. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, shattering horror. The denial was gone, replaced by a devastating wave of understanding. He wouldn't, she whispered, but it was a plea, not a statement. It was the last prayer of a woman whose faith was crumbling to dust. He did, I said gently. I took these papers to a lawyer this morning, Lucy. Mr. Evans. He explained everything. It's all real. She didn't cry. Not at first. A strange, terrifying numbness seemed to overtake her. She stared at the wall, at the framed photos of her and James, on their wedding day, on vacations, at Christmas, a gallery of lies. She looked at them as if they were pictures of strangers. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I reached out and put my hand over hers. It was as cold as ice. Why? The word was a tiny, broken sound. Why would he do this? I don't know, Luce. I answered honestly. Maybe the business is in trouble. Maybe he's greedy. I don't know. But we can't let him get away with it. She finally looked at me, and now the tears came. Not a loud, hysterical sob, but a silent, steady stream that ran down her cheeks. It was the quietest, most profound heartbreak I had ever witnessed. It was the sound of a world ending. What do I do? She asked, her voice cracking. My whole life. It's all tied to him. What am I supposed to do? For now, I said, squeezing her hand, you do nothing. You act normal. You don't let him know that anything has changed, and tomorrow you and I are going to go and see Mr. Evans together. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was the first step out of the ruins. When James returned home that evening, he did not find the tearful, confused wife he expected. He found Lucy waiting at the dining room table, the documents laid out neatly between them. She didn't shout or cry. In a voice as cold and hard as steel, she explained what she knew and what he had done. He tried to deny it, of course. The usual excuses poured out. It was for their future, a simple business necessity that she was being too emotional. But his words faltered against her stony silence. When he was finished, she simply said, I have spoken to a lawyer. You will undo this. You will go to the bank and remove my name and my house from this loan, or I will proceed with a fraud lawsuit. You have until tomorrow to make your choice. The fight drained from him instantly, replaced by the panicked realization that his sweet, innocent Lucy was gone forever. Faced with legal and financial ruin, he capitulated. Through a humiliating process overseen by Lucy's lawyer, the guarantee was rescinded and her property was released from the agreement. Their marriage ended not with a bang, but with the quiet signing of divorce papers. Lucy moved into her grandmother's house at 212 Oak Lane, not as a retreat, but as a reclaimed fortress. I visited her there a month later, finding her in the garden. The sadness in her eyes was real, but beneath it was a strength forged in betrayal. She had lost a life she thought she knew, but in its place, she had found herself. Life is not always about avoiding pain, but about finding the strength to move through it. True resilience is built when we face the hardest truths and choose to save ourselves, understanding that our security is a foundation we must build for ourselves. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message of hope and strength.